What's up? What's up? What's up? This is In My Circle, and I'm Ralph. How's everybody? Last time we had a great show last time, and before that we had another great show, and today we're gonna do something slightly different. We're not gonna. I'm not gonna make it a history. Yeah, you read it. You read the title right. I'm not gonna make it a history lesson, but just to quickly touch base, because a lot of people do not talk about this. You know, the the book by Washington Irving. Yes, I have an actual copy. The book of the life and voyages of Christopher Columbus, written by Washington Irving in the early 1800s, 1848, I think, if I'm not mistaken, or 1828. Um, this is the a copy from the 1800s, 1884. So this book's the story on this book has not been altered. If you read you know, versions, they could have been altered, modified, you know, slightly changed. In this book, there's about four stories, and when I say there's four stories, as is if you know, Washington Irving is famously known for the legendary Sleepy Hollow. It took place in a town called Sleepy Hollow in New York, and it's a legendary. It's an actual town, Sleepy Hollow. It exists, and this is where Washington Irving was from. He wrote, several sketch things, sketch stories. Like what we do, like when we do movies, we do movie shorts. He did. He wrote, written shorts, or a composite of different stories, under different pen names, maybe one, two, three, or four different pen names, three different pen names, and one I think as himself. Um, he also wrote the Rip Van Winkle, um, also a legendary book as well. But he was known as a poet, writer, fictional writer, and if you Google, Washington Irving, the life and voyages of Christopher Columbus, and you click on the Wikipedia, story, and they'll tell you as soon as you read the first line, the first thing they tell you that it is a fictional graph, biographical account. It's not a autobiography because when Irving wrote this, Columbus was long dead. He was already dead for about 200-300 years, I think, if I'm not mistaken. You know, so when you're writing a book, the first thing is you have to think of, you have to create, you have to, what is going to drive your book. You want people to be intrigued. You want people to be interested in your book, you know, and how are you going to, it's like, how do I get you to watch my video? I got to give you something that I haven't done yet. Well, I have spoken about Christopher Columbus, but not from a different point of view, different parallel, different, so yeah, I have to, I figure give you a different different story, different view on it, and I figured, from my perspective, you know, before I start talking about Columbus in a negative light or any positive, whatever, however, the controversial uh this figure was, we got to talk about Irving first. Um, the book and how why he wanted to sell books. Nobody's gonna sell, and nobody's gonna buy books about a tyrannical monster that is conquering a bunch of islands for a superpower at the time, Spain. So he wrote a book to intrigue people. He gave them a heroic vibe, a heroic narrative, an embellished heroic narrative is what he gave him. You know, he basically said, "Oh, he was a great guy. You know, he discovered new lands. He was an enigmatic explorer. You know,
Well, you know,
and he wasn't even an enigmatic explorer because
no,
I think the Santa Maria ran adrift, right?
I believe you're right. I think the time you ran adrift,
It,
even though it sailed with
it
the
was
group.
going into like it was. I don't know if it was a storm was destroying it in one of the ships because in fact when he left, you know what was left of the ship,
Ship.
the soldiers or the sailors, his crew, and some of the slaves that he took in, he built a fort with what was left.
Left.
And he left his men there. And when they came back, you know, they were massacred. You know, he came back to a massacred crew that he left because he had no room to take them back. He couldn't. The ship was, you know, but during that time, the Taino Indians, the Taino natives, Indians is what he called them because
Right. Thought he was in East Indies.
he was in East India, and we now know the word Indian is basically a derogatory, to the natives.
right.
You know, they're known as the indigenous Arawak, Carib, Taino peoples.
Right.
They were different sub-nations, but for the most part, they all were there for thousands of years. And he like I said, he wasn't even an enigmatic explorer. He thought the world was a round, as round as a pear, with a tit in the middle, with a nipple in the middle,
Middle.
or the top or the bottom, like a pear.
Like a bear.
You know. So, and
He was close.
he had read the Bible. He had read different nautical books. So he was really, really, he was educated, into, a lot of these, these conspiracy theorists, or, the world was flat. He supposedly was the only one that knew that the world was round. But maps of the world being round were already being printed in different parts of the world.
Right.
So he knew this, but not many people knew this. Basically, he knew information that some didn't. He felt.
Well, believe it or not, I wonder if he saw one of the maps of some astronomers, because in Italy, Greece, and even Egypt, there was a lot of astronomy. And I don't mean like the tarot cards. I'm about the study of the space area, and
Well,
a lot of the star charts they even depict, if you even before Columbus's time.
Well, you're right. He was inspired by, different. He read different things.
Right.
Different documents, different books, different.
Yeah. Because like say if you saw like they say like Antarctica really encircles the Earth. There's some maps that predates Columbus that shows Antarctica actually goes around
Correct.
the entire Earth. But on our map of today, or actually of I guess you could say either the 19th or 20th century, I don't know when the map was updated, but anybody out there can correct me, it's not the same map as it was 500 years prior.
Yeah. It was a different. The different maps were written differently.
So who knows, like, what's
But
authentic.
back to him being that he wasn't this enigmatic sailor. He lost one ship. Okay. He wasn't the first one to sight lands. It was one of the Pinzon brothers. One of the Pinzon brothers were the other captains
Right.
of these other ships. They were, so he could not commandeer 3 full ships by himself. So he needed help. And these Pinzon brothers were like his right-hand mans. they're his right hand men,
Right.
and one of the guys, I think the Spanish crown had a bounty. I guess it was 10,000, whatever
It was.
it was, 10,000 shillings or shekels, whatever
Shit,
rule,
even 50 shekels was a lot of money. back
whatever 10,000, whatever, whoever sighted land first was awarded.
then. Oh yeah.
And Columbus changed that narrative. He said, "No, you didn't see it. I seen it first." So he kind of lied, and Columbus made himself to be the first one on land. But remember, he wasn't this amazing voyager because when he landed, he thought he hit the West Indies,
Right.
which were totally on the other side of the world. And, you know, he's held as a hero for discovering America, but the man never stepped foot in America.
Right.
And so running back to the guy who wanted to sell books, how do you make it how do you romanticize some man that took a ship with a bunch of 3 ships across the sea and discovered new lands?
Just to show you that.
He can't say I killed
Oh, no,
and raped
Actually, what was his name again? I'm sorry, I slipped my mind.
Who?
The author.
Washington Irving.
Thank you, Washington Irving. I was going to say was, as you can see, even today, when you watch some movies, a lot of them are called, and they're not based off a true story. They're inspired.
They're
by a
either
true
inspired or
story.
based on a true story.
Well, there's two different things because
Yeah.
based on a true story is the actual facts.
Well,
Inspired by
yeah.
a true story shows some truth, and then there's some fiction into it,
Even though
like Titanic, like we were talking earlier.
Well, even though they say based, it's not always a true in that. Exactly. There is based means it is based on a true story, but they didn't tell you that they stuck in a couple lies in there to make it to fill it. Washington Irving, we don't know. Back to Washington Irving. Washington Irving, we don't know how much fiction the story of the life and voyages of Christopher Columbus is fact.
Right.
We don't know. I mean, we can we can match it with historical accounts. We can do the research and we can match it to see how close it is.
Right.
We also don't know what is fiction. We don't know, what is true, what isn't.
Right.
So we just go by today's narrative that in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue and discovered America.
Right.
Right, and he's a hero, and he gets a date. He gets a holiday, statues, blah blah blah.
Yeah. It's like they took.
But it's not true.
It's not true. They only took the beginning narrative, but didn't show what happened all in between. They just gave you 2 slices of bread with no meat and cheese.
But the thing is, it's not like he didn't give you a full story. I mean,
Yeah.
there's almost 900 pages in this book. I mean, this is a small book. There's a small book, and the reason why I decided to read from an older book is because, again, the story is not modified.
Right.
I'd rather take it from an older version. It's like this. When you read the Bible, there's many versions.
Right.
And nobody today knows the
The original content.
the original context. So we're, New Testament, the revised. It's a.
Let me just say this on that.
I'm not comparing religious books to.
Oh no.
I'm just using it as an example.
Well, if you go to Western Africa, Ethiopia, area, they have one of the original Bibles that was written, that I believe, I have to correct me on this or not, either postdates Jesus or predates Jesus or both. It's the Ethiopian Bible, and it's huge.
So it probably dates after.
Yeah. I forgot, but it's huge. And a lot of the scriptures come from that. I mean, actually, I'm sorry. the Greek actually comes from that, I believe, or the Aramaic is derived from that, which was translated to the Greek,
Yeah, the
which was
Aramaic is
translated
supposedly Jesus'
proper language.
proper his language, the language that
Yeah.
he
So
communicated
yeah.
with.
So basically, if you could find a book that predates the 1848 or 1820, it's at 48 right? Or 28 or something like that. Washington Irving, that predates this 1884. That'd be interesting. To find a book that was written on Columbus in the 16th century. No, wait, 16.
I'm just googling it when.
15th century. I'm sorry, 15th, 16th century.
Okay,
Book.
originally published in 1828.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was close. One of the dates it was either I said 1848 or 1828, and I was legitimately I was right on. So I mean, this was what, maybe 60 years older, right? This is 60.
You're 60 years old? No, a little less,
The
but
story's no.
about
This one's
1880. It's 1884.
1860, 1828 to
Yeah. 84.
84 is 60 years
Yeah,
old.
60 years.
The story has only been 60 years old when this book was
Actually, it's
created.
56, but
So 56, right?
Yeah.
Right. So 56 years at the time of the story was created. So there's not much altered.
Yeah.
The reason why,
But here's the thing: what inspired Washington Irving to write the book? Where he get the story from? That's a good question.
well, I mean,
I mean, I know you don't know.
we're never gonna
But,
know because
yeah.
the guy has been dead for like good 300 years.
Yeah.
We're going back, almost 300 years, I think. But Washington Irving wasn't just a writer. I mean, he was a practitioner of law. I don't think he was a lawyer, but he practiced law for a brief time.
You could be a practitioner of law.
And then in those times, college, in the early 1800s,
Actually,
college wasn't if you
required.
knew required
Yeah.
if you knew what the hell you were doing.
Yeah, if you know what you're doing, you can open a business. Having a college degree wasn't required.
I mean, now it is. Now
Now it is, yeah.
today, now because they want you
Everything
to
is
go through the
required.
bar. It's like
And sometimes you just did an apprenticeship.
correct.
You
He
study
was
and-
what is it what is the different terms of legal? What is it a legal
legal aid.
aid or a legal?
Oh, I know you're talking about not a legal aid, but begins with a P, I think.
like
prosecutor.
like a secretary.
Sorry.
Like a
Yeah, I know. I know
like
what you're talking about.
you can
You
work
do-
in
you can-
law,
but
practice
you're not,
it,
but you're not a lawyer,
but you're not a lawyer.
right?
And you
Kind
can
of like a legal aid, but it's
you
something
can
else.
you can give legal
Advice.
advice, and he was doing that. He was giving legal advice.
Actually, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think a law degree wasn't required to almost to the mid 19th century.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. See, Washington Irving was born into money, and when his family fortune was going bankrupt, he figured the only way to save it was through his writing.
Yeah, and you got to also think too, America was still a very young country
Correct.
at 1828, and plus they just got finished with the French and American War, not too far.
And Washington Irving, if I'm not mistaken, is considered America's first official novelist, official writer in America. You're going back to 1828. I mean, that's right before. That's way before the Civil War.
Yeah,
That is probably the golden era
it's before railroad.
before the railroad. Everything was probably horse and carriage. Everything was very before Victorian. It was very, very old.
Oh,
And for everything was still going by ship. Everything the allure was about the ships because there was no cars, there was no Mustangs, only in horse form. The horses, the natives were roaming the pastures when he wrote this book.
right.
You know what I'm saying? America. When he wrote this book, America was not the America that it was today.
Well, I'm sure there were what do you call it? Like bookkeepers, I'm sure, that told the stories of what Columbus, and and then from there you have to discern.
Well, I think I think it probably went a little bit deeper than that. I mean,
Yeah.
before he probably did some research. You know,
If you guys are hearing that sound, because we're about to close and I got the next show.
yeah,
coming up.
he probably did some research on on Christopher Columbus, of some sort. I mean, he had to get he has a lot of from his story. So if he told you half the story was true
Right.
and the rest was fiction,
Mm-hmm.
that could be. Remember,
Right.
I want to write a 700-page story, not a 200-page story. So he could have, some of it could have been true. Some of it, that my theory
Oh,
is
here's another thing too.
my theory is that it's fact and fiction.
Right. And with we don't even know if any of the sailors. I'm sure a lot of them weren't literate, but who knows who was? I'm pretty sure some were literate, like maybe like the navigator.
Well, there was one.
Yeah. But the rest of the crew were just taking orders, and they probably weren't literate. But there was probably a few literate people on the ships because you have to know how to navigate, read maps, and stuff like that.
Bartolome
very
de la
little were probably
Casas. Bartolome de la Casas was very literate. He came real quick. I'll tell you a
Yeah,
2-second story
Yeah.
before you close. Bartolome de la Casas was a sailor on his ships. Witnessed Columbus and the crew massacre 3,000 people in less than a day.
Yeah, that's a good book to find.
They sicked the hungry dogs on the indigenous peoples. They chopped, cut, sliced. They did horrific things. And Bartolome de las Casas was, he was so horrified that he converted to Christianity and became a priest. And he became the official priest of the Taino indigenous people. He was a protector, and he when Columbus was taken back in chains, he was one of the hand accounts witnesses that Bobadilla used to try and chain and arrest Columbus and the brothers and his close conspirators all in one, and send them back to Spain. This is true, all true. This is not made. I don't know if this is in his book, but I will find out. This has been In My Circle with Ralph. I'm also known as DJ Noise, and this is Hamilton Radio. Listen, subscribe, and share, and comment. Let me know what you think of the story. Let me know what you think of the video. And we're out. Till next time. Have a great one.